We, as a society, have been getting the debate wrong in country music. I've been suspecting this for a while now, but never gave it much thought. I began realizing it with the release of Luke Combs' deluxe sophomore album, but like I said, it wasn't too big of an issue. Then Dangerous came along, and then I did the same thing again, shoved that thought deep into my brain, and then this song came along. Thomas Rhett's Country Again. The amount of people who were praising the song as a masterpiece was ridiculous, just because it has countryer sound. So many people these days have become so obsessed with the thought that the problem with country music is its sound. Look at this comment I found on a discussion in the country music stuff thread. Usually, real country means that the singer/songwriter has a major influence on the recording instead of the producer. You see, that chunk I actually agree with. People like Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson got to have that, and look where they are now, the most highly praised country stars of all time. But here is where the comment begins to take a complete nosedive and where I agree with it. And little is done to disrupt the sound created by the musicians who are playing instruments like acoustic, electric, steel guitars, fiddles, mandolins, or banjos. This comment is basically saying you need to have these instruments in order to call it country. If you think I'm just being delusional, here's another one. If you can't hear a fiddle, banjo, or a steel guitar, it's probably not country. Not only do I find that incredibly foolish, it goes against every fundamental country music stands for. You know what that statement is the equivalent to? That's like saying in order for jazz to be jazz, it needs to be all swing, have saxophones, trumpets, and trombones. Jazz is a genre that isn't subjugated to be one thing. It's very freeform with its creativity. Sure, swing was how the genre started out, but now you have all different lanes the genre goes into, such as funk, Latin fusion, bebop, and Dixieland. But you don't see anyone saying, oh, none of that's real jazz. I won't listen to it if it doesn't have these specific instruments. It is so idiotic to think in order for a song to be deemed worthy of listening to, it must conform to classic standards. And even then, listen to this sample of Johnny Cash at San Quentin performing Folsom Prison Blues.
And I ain't seen the sunshine since I don't know when. I'm stuck in Folsom Prison and time keeps dragging on.
I'm sorry, do my ears deceive me, or do I not hear fiddle, banjo, mandolin, and steel? Johnny Cash isn't considered one of the greatest country stars of all time because he had country sound. Johnny Cash is the greatest for his compelling yet relatable stories. People were able to physically emote with his writing. So taking this all the way back to the beginning of the video, these three albums are put on a silver platter and treated like golden gods because they sound country. People say, oh, Luke Combs and Morgan Wallen are actively saving country music. And after giving it much deliberation, I can actively say they aren't, or at the very least overall. Luke Combs is what you see ain't always what you get is loved because of its country sound. But tell me this, take that one aspect out, what does this deluxe album have? With the exception of Without You, which is frankly great, I won't deny that, all of these songs have nothing. Let's say these songs had a more pop-like sound to the extent of someone like Brett Young. No one would be praising these songs because the writing of these are just flat out not good. They aren't terrible, but they aren't great either. But the country sound masks that issue because so many people just blindly assume country sound equals amazing. Then there's Morgan Wallen's Dangerous. Now, I still like this album. I think it's pretty good, but this is easily the most overrated country album of the entire year, because once again, Morgan's voice sounds country, and the instrumentals for the most part are somewhat authentic. Now the album has some great songs like Sand in My Boots and Wondering About the Wind, but it stumbles over every few songs. He literally rhymes drinking and sinking twice in two different tracks. Honestly, in terms of writing quality, only 30% of this album is great, 40% max. The rest of it is just broke country, just not as awful, but it isn't phenomenal either. Then finally, Country Again, an album whose title completely infuriates me. And it isn't because in order to be country, you had to be country in the first place. It's that Thomas Rhett's definition of country is having all these instruments and excusing that for some extremely repetitive and honestly pandering writing. Country music isn't defined by its sound. And you're thinking at this point, what, do I support pop country and trap country, two of the most hated country subgenres in the industry? Yes. Yes, I do. Now, you need to listen carefully. I support the genres. I do not support the music output, because a lot of it's just garbage. I don't judge songs on how they sound. Most pop country is just repetitive and bad for a lot of structural reasons. I've yet to find a trap country song that's actually good, but I'm not going to gatekeep an entire genre to stop it from pushing boundaries. So many people refuse to give these genres a chance because they automatically assume it's all awful given how a majority of it is. Do I blame them for that? Absolutely not. I blame these genres for the overall community's obsession with country sound. They've made them so desperate to hear anything that can allow them to remember the better days of country music. But the problem is, they're mostly just meeting you halfway. The writing quality is mostly the same. Look at it! Do you want to know why people like Casey Musgraves and Chris Stapleton are the two most beloved mainstream acts in modern country music? If you think it is because they were countryer than everyone else, you're dead wrong. It's because they were substantive. They didn't just have countryer instrumentation and that was it. If they did, I wouldn't care much for them at all. Same for John Party's Heartache Medication. It's a gorgeous album sonically, but it also has great messaging and tells a great story of heartbreak and coping with it, as the title alludes. People like Jason Isbell and Sturgill Simpson don't fit the mold of these standards whatsoever. Their last two albums aren't traditional country music at all. They moved past that necessity and made the music they wanted to make, and they all came out fantastic. The Nashville Sound is more of a heartland rock album, yet it adheres to the most important principle country music has. It's powerful and relatable songwriting. Songs like Tupelo and The Last of My Kind are just so emotionally driven and are about the fears and anxieties Jason Isbell had. Sturgill's last two albums, Sound and Fury and A Sailor's Guide to Earth, aren't traditional country in the slightest, yet they are praised for their powerful lyricism within them. A tale of father and son that is so compelling. People don't love them for their sound, they love how they express their lives into their music. Feathered Indians isn't one of my 10 all-time favorite songs because of Tyler Childers' delivery or the rich acoustics. They add much to its staying power, yes, but it's the progression of such a beautiful love story that makes the song special, not the sound of it. Do you know why Taylor Swift's Red is considered one of the greatest albums of the modern era? It isn't because it's a great pop record, or because it's a great country record. It's because it's a great Taylor Swift record. It ignores the illusion of control and sound and delves deep into Taylor's personal life, which is a blend of profound maturity and her transition from a teenager into a young woman. All Too Well is my #1 breakup song, and it arguably had the least country sound on the entire list because its emotional and sensitive lyrics are what sold me. This has become such a massive issue for me because if we focus on merely the sound of country music, we will lose what made this genre special in the first place. Idolizing the sound of country music just gives an excuse for someone not to put much effort into the writing. Think of all the stories that will be stripped away. Think about a man who has given so much to his artistry that he loses out on the most important thing to him, his own son. And imagine the emotional turmoil he had to go through, all that bottled up pain, and putting it all into an album. Think about a woman who, even in the most difficult of circumstances, finds a way to be content with her life and focuses on the joys and comforts she has, rather than their impoverished life and social class, telling people in similar situations everything will be okay, and be proud of who they are. Think about a man who feels an enormous weight of guilt and fears he will lose everything he has due to his battle with substance abuse, and finds the strength and the will to get better, and makes an album all about the peace and clarity he found within that time. Think about a woman inspiring so many young girls with her simple yet profound stories of love and loss, and putting it in such an approachable and relatable manner, bringing in a new wave of fans, people who have never listened to a country song ever, and getting a first glance into such a wonderful genre. And finally, think about a man who has made some of the most profound and relatable music in country music's entire history, performing for inmates in prisons because he believed they deserved it just as much as anyone else. And it was with those performances unknowingly inspiring future legends, even in his final days still putting out powerful music after all this time, all about the guilt and regret in what he views as a disastrous legacy. Yet despite that, many in this day and age, even though he's long gone, revere him as the greatest country musician ever known. These songs and artists mean so much to me because they're all about what made country music great, the stories to be told, the emotional weight they all have. If we continue down this path, we are just going to be idolizing hollow instruments rather than the artists themselves. Anyone can play an instrument, but only an artist can make a song a masterpiece.